So to close out, we've recapped a lot of these debates on a lot of top talent. A lot of them are really tough arguments. But to close out, Steph and I are just going to give one quarterback sleeper for 2020. Over the past two seasons, 2 years ago, if you drafted Patrick Mahomes late, you probably won your fantasy championship or made a pretty deep run. This past year, it was Lamar Jackson. If you scooped him up in the mid to late rounds, you probably were making the playoffs. You probably were making a really deep run. So this year, quarterback is always that position that's like if you can hit on your quarterback late in the draft and get the value at running back and receiver early, that's what can really set you apart in your fantasy football league. So Steph and I are going to give one early quarterback sleeper for 2020. This is the guy that you should be able to draft in the double-digit rounds that could make the difference in getting you to the playoffs or winning you a championship. Steph, I'm going to let you start it off. Who is one quarterback sleeper who has got some insane upside for the 2020 season?
Yeah, when you can take some dart throws late in a draft and you might be potentially coming away with, a top 5 quarterback, it's huge. Now, these are also names, though, if they come out and put up stinkers to start the year, maybe first 3 or 4 weeks, we're just not seeing what we expected or the upside just isn't there, then by all means just drop them and they can be a streamer on waivers. Maybe you grab them later. But for me, it's Denver Broncos' Drew Lock. He only had 5 starts in 2019, and they went 4-1 in those games. John Elway's already come out and said, no question, that Drew Lock is the guy in Denver right now. And his 64% completion rate was better than any of his completion rates in college. So to me, that says, look, this guy is improving. He's understanding the game better, especially at the pro level. He had one bad game where he had like 8 fantasy points, and that was the snow game where there was an absolute blizzard, like 4 feet of snow. Like guys can't even see because their helmets are just full of snow in Kansas City. That was on the road in Kansas City as well, so you add that in there too. It was just brutal. So I'm not going to read into that game too much. And I have confidence that the Broncos offense will improve. A lot of guys in the fantasy community, I think Alex and myself included, love Noah Fant as a tight end this year that we can grab a little bit later, who could have kind of that Mark Andrews blow up that we saw last season and even in 2018, right? It was George Kittle, or 2017, sorry. It was George Kittle, one that's just, here's a guy on the edge. He's showing some promise. He's a season away from being an absolute breakout. And we know that tight ends typically take some time to get going. We don't see rookie tight ends really produce at crazy levels. So for me, Fant is what I'm definitely circling. So adding some more weapons there. We all love Cortland Sutton. We think he's a beast. Trying to get hands on him everywhere we can, especially in Dynasty. But if you're going to take a second tight end or a defense or a kicker in a draft, why not burn a spot and find out if you have the next breakout quarterback in Drew Lock? Who knows, man? There's so much upside in the unknown. That's really one of the premier mottos that I've taken into fantasy that has helped me time and time again. There is upside in the unknown. Worst case scenario with Drew Lock, you drop him. But best case scenario, man, maybe we're talking about him as a top 5 quarterback next season. I love him as a dart throw late. But Alex, who do you have as a QB sleeper in 2020?
Yeah, Steph, I love it. And honestly, a good draft strategy could be to snag maybe my guy in the 10th round and then Drew Lock in the 12th round and hold him for 4 weeks, see what you got. Maybe you cut them if they suck. If they show some flashes, maybe you hang on to him as a streamer and go from there. And the guy I'm gonna bring up is Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones finished as the QB 24 in 2019. He was the QB 15, though, in terms of points per game as a rookie. And in just 12 games, he had 3,000 passing yards and 24 touchdowns. That 16-game pace is 4,000 yards and 32 passing touchdowns. If Daniel Jones goes out in his rookie year and throws 4,000 yards and 32 touchdowns, we're talking about him as like a top 6, top 7 quarterback next year. And right now, that's just not happening. And another really interesting thing about Daniel Jones, he actually provided a really high rushing baseline, which I'm almost laughing a little bit because it was so shocking. He had 279 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns in 2019. That was more rushing yards per game than Russell Wilson or Dak Prescott, which is like unreal for me to think about. He did have the fumbling problem. He led the NFL in fumbles. He needs to clean that up. He needs to be, less turnover prone. But you got to think, if he is able to clean up some of those turnovers, the Giants are just going to be that much better of an offense. They do have the new coach in Joe Judge, and a lot of those weapons are going to be healthy now. You got Saquon Barkley back and healthy. The receiving corps, Golden Tate, Sterling Shepard, Darius Slayton coming into year 2 looking strong, and his rookie season should all be healthy. So, I mean, Evan Ingram at tight end.
Evan Ingram, yeah.
Is going to be healthy. So if they can keep that weapon group together, that could help Daniel Jones a ton. He was throwing to Rhett Ellison at times last season. That was brutal. So, you know, Daniel Jones, he showed a lot of flashes in his rookie season. He actually showed some weeks of extremely high upside. He finished as the QB2 on the week twice in week 3 and week 10, and he finished as the QB1 on the week twice in week 8 and then in championship week 16. So 4 of his 12 starts, he literally was a top 2 quarterback. And if you just think if the wheels don't come off, and a lot of the other starts he was okay, but if the wheels just don't totally come off in those other 8 starts, like if you're 25% of your weeks, you're putting up a QB1 or QB2 performance, that's all you can ask for if he can be consistent over the rest of the season. So we've seen the upside. He has the absolute ability to win you your week when he is hot. And I just don't know why you wouldn't take a dart throw on Daniel Jones late. I mean, I imagine in this year's drafts, if you're taking Drew Lock and Daniel Jones late, I think one of the two for sure pans out, or at least turns into a strong streamer. Maybe you can pair them with another guy and kind of go back and forth depending on matchup. But that late quarterback strategy is just so important to setting you apart in fantasy football. And these are two guys where there's still, I mean, we saw a lot more out of Daniel Jones last season than we did out of Drew Lock as far as a sample size, but there's still so much value in the unknown. New head coach, only his second year in the NFL. There's just so much upside here. So I love the Drew Lock pick. I'm really also excited about Daniel Jones, and you got to scoop him up in round 10 or 11. You got to.
Yeah, I love it. I do. I really do. I think, like, you know, you look at your quarterback position, right? Can you get a guy that's maybe a little bit more stalwart and proven, and then pair it with one of these, you know, high upside young guys? Yes. So look at, you know, Matt Stafford or Matt Ryan or Ben Roethlisberger, and then pair them with a deep shot that could pay off. I love that approach in this year's draft. And man, you got me pretty excited about Daniel Jones now. I remember his kind of, you know, coming of age game where it's coming down to the wire at Tampa Bay on the road in the rain, and it's, you know, clock running down, and he takes his, you know, 5-step drop back. They're sending everybody deep. He sees an opening middle of the field and just takes off on his own. So you're talking about that rushing, you know, and he gets the touchdown on that play. So you're talking about his rushing ability. That's something, too, that could be very sneaky for fantasy. If he has a nice rushing floor, which a lot of people don't talk about or really think of, they kind of see him as like kind of like Jameis Winston, right? Like just a gunslinger who's going to take these 50-50 shots. I could absolutely see Daniel Jones being the next guy that we're talking about as a QB1.